They say every dream home comes with a price, but I never imagined mine would involve an epic battle against the most overbearing HOA president in her story. If I'd known what I was walking into, I might have second-guessed my decision to move in. What started as a peaceful escape from city life turned into a showdown for the ages, one I never saw coming. From the moment I stepped onto the property, I felt like the house was meant to be mine. It was everything I had been searching for. Charming, full of character, and completely free from the iron grip of an HOA. Or so I thought, but as I would soon learn, even freedom comes with its share of challenges, especially when you're up against someone like Karen, the self-proclaimed king of the neighborhood. It all started when I finally moved into what I thought was my dream home, a cozy little place on the edge of a picturesque neighborhood. The house had everything I could ask for. Charm, a spacious yard for my 2-year-old to play in. And most importantly, it wasn't part of the HOA. That's right. The house had been grandfathered out of the HOA when the association expanded its reach. It was like owning a little slice of freedom in a sea of overregulation. I felt like I'd won the lottery. I'd always heard horror stories about HOAs and their power trips, so the fact that my home wasn't part of the association was a huge relief. I didn't have to deal with petty fines, overbearing inspections, or arbitrary rules about lawn height and mailbox color. The previous owners had made it clear that my property was outside the HOA's jurisdiction, and I intended to keep it that way, or so I thought. For years, the previous owner had kept a low profile. From what I'd heard, he managed to fly under the radar, politely ignoring HOA meetings and their increasingly absurd rules. But as I quickly learned, times had changed. The HOA had a new president, Karen, or as I like to call her, the self-proclaimed HOA Karen. Karen was the kind of guy who probably dreams in bylaws and wakes up excited to ruin someone's day with a strongly worded letter. What started as an awkward misunderstanding quickly spiraled into something much bigger. Karen was determined to bring my house under HOA control, and he wasn't above using intimidation tactics to get her way. Little did he know, I wasn't going to roll over and let her bully me. What came next would push me to my limits and force me to fight for my family's freedom and the right to enjoy my own home. My first run-in with Karen came 3 weeks after my family and I moved in. Picture thee! I was outside, paintbrush in hand, touching up the garden fence while my wife was inside trying to wrangle our son. Life was good. Then I noticed a man standing at my gate, clipboard in hand, chest puffed out like he was about to give a TED Talk on the art of overstepping boundaries. He radiated the kind of confidence only HOA presidents and entitled customers at Starbucks seem to have. Before I could say anything, he unlatched my gate and started walking in like he owned the place. I put down my paintbrush, a mix of confusion and annoyance bubbling up. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. He didn't miss a beat. "Hello," he said briskly, as if he was already running late for her next unsolicited intrusion. "I'm Karen, president of the HOA. I'm here to make sure you've received your compliance packet." Compliance packet? For what? A homeowner bingo card? I frowned, trying to figure out what he was talking about. "I'm sorry, but the house isn't part of the HOA, I said, keeping my voice even. Karen gave a little chuckle, the kind that makes you instantly want to punch someone, and waved my comment off like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. "All properties in the area are subject to HOA regulations," he said. "You'll need to register these additions, the swing set and the garden, with the board. Otherwise, I'll have to issue fines." Now, I'll admit I'm not exactly an expert on HOA bylaws, but I know my house was never part of it. So I politely, okay, maybe not so politely, reminded her of that fact. "Karen," I said, "the property isn't in your HOA. Never was. Check your records." That should have been the end of it. But Karen wasn't about to let a little thing like facts stop her. "I'll double-check," he said, clutching her clipboard like it was the Constitution. "In the meantime, these fines are serious. Ignoring them won't make them go away." At the point, I had two options: laugh or throw the paintbrush. I chose to laugh, although I'm not sure it made Karen feel any better. "Thanks for the warning," I said, handing her the gate key and firmly showing her the way out. I wish I could say that was the last I saw of Karen, but no, dear viewer, that would have been too easy. Over the next few weeks, the letters started rolling in. Each one was more ridiculous than the last. According to Karen, the color of my front door was too distracting, my backyard fence was dangerously high, and the swing set, my 2-year-old's pride and joy, was somehow a threat to the community aesthetic. I'll admit there were moments I questioned my sanity. Was Karen right? Did I unknowingly move into an alternate universe where swing sets and garden fences were public enemies? But then I'd look at my smiling son playing in the backyard, and I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't about to back down. So what do you guys think? Am I crazy for standing my ground? Have you ever had to deal with an HOA Karen like Karen? Let me know in the comments below. Bonus points if you leave a star emoji to show your support. And trust me, the saga is far from over. Stick around for the next part, where Karen escalates her harassment, and I decide it's time to fight back. Spoiler alert. Things get messy. The letters kept coming, each one more outrageous than the last. Every time I opened the mailbox, it was another demand for payment and a stern warning about my supposed violations. Fines for the color of my front door, the height of my backyard fence, and even the way I'd trimmed my bushes were piling up like Karen's personal to-do list. I swear, if I had left a garden gnome on the lawn, he would have fined me for that too. And the best part? He even had the nerve to tell my neighbors that my non-compliance was dragging down their property values, as if my garden was some kind of apocalyptic wasteland bringing the neighborhood to its knees. One sunny morning, while I was finally getting around to repotting some flowers, I noticed Karen in my yard. Again! There he was, crouched at an angle, snapping photos like he was a nature photographer hunting for Bigfoot. Only instead of documenting elusive wildlife, he was laser-focused on my vegetable garden. I walked up, trying to keep my cool, and asked, "Can I help you, Karen?" He didn't even flinch. "These is for the board's records," he said, smug as ever. "We need to document your violations." Violations? I thought, is he going to write me up for planting tomatoes too close together? At that point, I knew something had to be done. If Karen was going to treat my yard like her personal photo studio, I was going to make it a little harder for her to gain access. So I went full Mission Impossible on my property, installing security cameras and a sturdy lock on the gate. I even joked with my wife that we should add lasers and a moat while we were at it. Karen, predictably, didn't take the well. The next day, he left a letter taped to my fence. Yes, the very fence he had complained about, accusing me of obstructing HOA inspections. The irony was not lost on me. As if that wasn't enough, the fines doubled overnight. Suddenly, my mailbox wasn't just a place for bills and coupons. It was a portal to Karen's personal vendetta. And now, he wasn't just sending fines. He was threatening to involve lawyers. I half expected a carrier pigeon to show up with a tiny scroll detailing her next absurd demand. My wife, ever the voice of reason, told me it was time to bring in some reinforcements. "We need to talk to a lawyer," she said. "The is getting out of hand." So we did. I gathered everything. The deed to the house, old neighborhood maps, and even a copy of the original agreement that excluded our property from HOA jurisdiction. It felt like I was preparing for battle, and honestly, I kind of was. Karen wasn't just a persistent nuisance, he was a full-on tyrant in khakis, and if he wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. The ridiculousness of the situation wasn't lost on me, though. Here I was, a grown adult, going toe-to-toe with a man who seemed to think her HOA clipboard gave her diplomatic immunity. But that wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for my family and our right to enjoy our home without being micromanaged to death. As I reviewed the evidence with my wife that evening, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "Who does the guy think he is?" I asked. "The king of lawn maintenance?" My wife shook her head. "He's about to find out that you don't mess with a man and her yard," she said with a grin. And with that, we were ready to fight back, one fine at a time. So what do you think, guys? Have you ever dealt with someone like Karen, the self-appointed neighborhood overlord? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to leave a star emoji if you're rooting for me to win the battle. Trust me, the story isn't over yet. You won't want to miss what happens next. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. And let me tell you, I walked into that courthouse feeling like I was about to face a boss battle in a video game. I wasn't armed with a sword, but I did have my evidence. Photos of my property, official HOA boundary maps, and a delightful collection of Karen's ridiculous letters, each more outrageous than the last. If smugness were a weapon, Karen showed up wielding it like Excalibur. He sauntered in with her lawyer, who looked just as convinced of their impending victory. As we took our seats, Karen's lawyer began her argument with the confidence of someone trying to sell a used car with a missing engine. He cited outdated maps and vague clauses, claiming my property fell under HOA jurisdiction. I'll admit, for a moment, I wondered if he'd actually convinced the judge with her legal tap dance. But then my attorney stood up, calm and collected, and proceeded to dismantle every one of their claims like a house of cards in a windstorm. My lawyer presented the official neighborhood map, highlighting clear as day that my property was outside the HOA's grasp. I swear you could see the gears in Karen's head grinding to a halt as the reality set in. But of course, Karen couldn't go down quietly. He kept interrupting, trying to inject her 2 cents every chance he got. At one point, the judge finally had enough and snapped, "Mr. Karen, unless you're suddenly a licensed attorney, I suggest you let your lawyer handle the—" Ouch. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the weight of every petty letter, every absurd fine, and every instance of Karen's harassment bubbling to the surface. I laid it all out, the trespassing, the endless barrage of mail, and the security footage that showed Karen acting like a self-appointed sheriff in my yard. I couldn't help but throw in a little sarcasm, noting how he seemed to think he was on an episode of Law and Order, HOA edition. The judge didn't seem amused. By Karen, that is. She reviewed the evidence with a poker face that Karen probably mistook as a sign of hope. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. After a few moments of silence, she delivered her ruling. The court finds in favor of the defendant. All fines are dismissed, and the plaintiff is ordered to cease all contact with the defendant and their property. I could have cried tears of joy right then and then. The relief was overwhelming, and I might have let out a tiny cheer under my breath. Karen, on the other hand, looked like someone had just told her her HOA president sash was being revoked. He huffed and puffed, muttering something about unfair treatment as he shuffled out of the courtroom. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I had just won the lottery, or at least a really satisfying game of Monopoly where I managed to keep Boardwalk and Park Place. But the best part wasn't just winning. It was knowing that Karen's reign of terror had finally come to an end. So folks, here's my takeaway. Stand your ground, gather your receipts, and never underestimate the power of a good lawyer. They say news travels fast, but in our neighborhood it travels at the speed of light when it's juicy enough. On the day of the verdict, you could practically feel the collective anticipation buzzing through the streets. People were whispering, texting, even pausing their dog walks to huddle in hushed conversations. Karen's courtroom defeat wasn't just news, it was the event of the year. The tyrant had finally been toppled, and the neighborhood was basking in the sweet glow of justice served. By the time I got back from the courthouse, I couldn't make it 5 steps without someone stopping me to ask, "Is it true? Did you really beat Karen?" It felt less like a legal victory, and more like I'd won a championship game for the home team. And honestly, I wasn't mad about it. After months of being harassed, the validation was as satisfying as the first sip of coffee on a Monday morning. Word of Karen's courtroom defeat spread faster than a neighborhood gossip chain on steroids. One minute, the verdict was announced. The next, every resident within a 5-block radius seemed to know about it. Neighbors I had never even met were stopping me during my morning coffee run to share their own horror stories about Karen's iron-fisted reign over the HOA. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had been harassed. Who knew the guy had such a talent for making enemies? One woman told me Karen once fined her $200 for leaving her Christmas lights up until January 2nd. "He said it was an eyesore," she huffed, "but he left her Halloween decorations up until February." Another neighbor confessed that she paid over $500 in fines for having a garden gnome that Karen deemed non-compliant with community aesthetics. The audacity was almost impressive. The stories kept coming, each more ridiculous than the last. A retired couple down the block claimed Karen tried to charge them for unapproved landscaping after they planted a single rose bush in their front yard. A young family shared that they got fined for letting their kids' toys clutter the backyard. Never mind that the yard was fully fenced and not visible to anyone else. It turned out Karen's greatest hits included fining one family for having too many garden gnomes and demanding another repaint their house because the shade of beige they'd chosen was too cheerful. One elderly neighbor confessed he'd been fined for not trimming her hedges to Karen's exact specifications. The man was a menace, and now that he was down, everyone was ready to pile on. The pressure on the HOA board mounted like a reality TV drama. Residents started showing up at board meetings demanding answers and accountability. It was glorious chaos. Faced with a community revolt, the board had no choice but to hold a special meeting. The result? Karen was unceremoniously booted from her position as president. You could practically hear the collective cheer across the neighborhood. A week later, I received an official letter from the HOA, signed by the new president. It was part apology, part peace offering. They acknowledged Karen's inappropriate conduct and assured me that my property would no longer be subject to HOA interference. I almost framed the letter out of pure spite, but decided against it. Still, it felt like the HOA equivalent of a white flag. But oh no, Karen wasn't going to slink away quietly. That's not her style. He took to the community forums to air her grievances, accusing me of lying in court, rigging the trial, as if that's a thing, and conspiring with the HOA board to dethrone her. Yes, Karen was out here peddling wild conspiracy theories, like he was auditioning for a Netflix documentary. The best part? Her posts didn't have the effect he hoped for. Instead of rallying support, Karen managed to alienate herself even further. Comments ranged from, LOL, you lost, move on, dude, to maybe the gnomes were right about you. One resident even posted a picture of their newly painted house with the caption, too cheerful for Karen, not sorry. As Karen's online antics continued, the backlash grew. People started openly mocking her, and a few residents even formed a neighborhood book club specifically to read HOA bylaws and discuss how ridiculous her reign had been. It was petty, it was hilarious, and it was thoroughly deserved. Finally, after weeks of trying and failing to salvage her reputation, Karen did what all fallen tyrants do. He fled. One morning, the moving trucks showed up, and by the evening, Karen was gone. It was like the villain's final exit in a soap opera, complete with dramatic whispers of, "Did you hear? He's really gone the time." Of course, I wasn't sad to see her go. Let's be real, Karen brought it all on herself. But her departure felt like the closing of a chapter, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. The collective sigh of relief was palpable. People started chatting more, smiling more, and for the first time, I actually felt like part of a community. With Karen finally gone, it was like the neighborhood had taken a deep, collective sigh of relief. The air seemed fresher, the birds chirped louder, and even the sun seemed to shine a little brighter. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but the difference was genuinely noticeable. For the first time in years, people walked their dogs without glancing over their shoulders, half expecting a scolding email about leash lengths. The HOA wasted no time making changes. Within weeks, they had issued an apology letter to all residents promising a new era of community cooperation. Yeah, that's right, cooperation, not dictatorship. I couldn't help but smirk as I read the letter, imagining Karen seething in her new, probably HO-free residence. And then something unexpected happened. My neighbors, who had once avoided me like I was radioactive, started stopping by. "Thanks for standing up to her," one of them said, handing me a fresh-baked pie. Another neighbor, who I barely recognized because they'd never stepped outside before, waved and said, "We owe you one." It was like I'd suddenly become the unofficial hero of the block. But here's the kicker. People actually started inviting me to HOA meetings. Me, the guy who wanted nothing to do with them in the first place. At first, I laughed it off. "You want me to join the HOA? Isn't that like asking a vegan to run a barbecue joint?" But the invitations kept coming, and honestly, curiosity got the better of me. At my first meeting, I walked in expecting chaos. Instead, I found a surprisingly calm and civil group of people. No one was arguing over the color of their garden gnomes or demanding fines for mailbox decorations. Discussions were focused on actual community improvements, fixing potholes, organizing events, even planting trees. It was almost pleasant. Still, I couldn't resist cracking a joke. So, do I get a special badge for being the guy who dethroned King Karen? The room erupted in laughter, and for the first time I felt like I was part of something positive. But let's not get too sentimental. Karen may have been gone, but the scars of her reign lingered. A few neighbors still flinched at the sight of a clipboard, and one even confessed they had recurring nightmares about HOA fines. We all agreed it would take time to heal, but at least we were heading in the right direction. Things were peaceful for a while. I spent my days enjoying the backyard, planting tomatoes in my vegetable garden, and finally finishing the swing set for my son. Life felt normal, maybe even a little too normal. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One morning I found an envelope in my mailbox. It wasn't the usual junk mail or a friendly neighborhood flyer. The one had no return address, just my name scrawled in big, bold letters. My stomach flipped. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short, ominous message. Not everyone's happy with your victory. Watch your back. I looked around, half expecting to see Karen hiding in the bushes with a pair of binoculars. But the street was quiet, almost eerily so. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that the wasn't over. Sure, Karen was gone. But was he really gone? Or had I just made a new enemy lurking in the shadows? Let me know in the comments. What would you do if you got a message like that? Would you brush it off or start looking over your shoulder every time you stepped outside? I'm dying to hear your theories. Do you think Karen is behind them, or is someone else in the neighborhood stirring the pot? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're on #Team Justice, don't forget to leave a star emoji to show your support. Seriously, I need all the good vibes I can get right now because something tells me the story is far from over. And hey, if you've been enjoying these HOA tales, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story, especially as the mystery unfolds. I'll keep you updated every step of the way. Oh, and don't forget to share the video with your friends. Who knows, they might have some insights into how to handle a situation like this. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and keep your gates locked.